Good morning, everybody. We're so pleased to have you join us on this webinar today. We welcome you to this webinar being organized by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN. ICSAN is a leading recognized professional body in Nigeria dedicated to enhancing the status and practice of corporate governance and public administration. It may interest to know that ICSAN is the only professional body authorized in Nigeria to conduct the examinations leading to the qualification of chartered secretaries and administrators. The Institute is a member of the Corporate Secretaries International Association, the CSIA, a Hong Kong registered global organization dedicated to developing and growing the study and practice of secretaryship to improve professional standards, the quality of governance practice, and to improve organizational performance. The association is the global voice of corporate secretaries and governance professionals in the world. Now, one of the objectives of ICSAN as an institute is to develop and promote the professional ideals, standards, ethics, code of conduct, and the interests of the chartered governance professionals. Today's webinar is about the reality of our current times, the fact that a new normal way of working has emerged at a very unusual time. So today's discussion is apt and will provide some guidance on the way forward. We're happy to again welcome our colleagues and friends from India and from UK. From the back end, I can see people joining us from Ghana, from Kenya, and of course, our home, Nigeria. Now, a few ground rules as we go into today's session. Please remember to mute yourself upon joining. We have tried to do that by default, but please let's just help us to maintain some decorum. So as you join this meeting, we have a lot of icons, and the chat room is there. If you need to ask a question, just drop your questions there. The item of the program, that is to welcome and invite our chief host, the president and the chairman of council, Mr. Bode Ayeku, FCIS, for a brief welcome address. My president, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, moderator. It is my pleasure to welcome all participants to this webinar organized by the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. I thank our council members also joining us. I know that the president of the Corporate Secretaries International Association is joining. My counterparts in all parts of the world, that is president of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators from our sister institutes in all parts of the world are joining, and I welcome them with their members. It is not a new thing for us that COVID-19 is impacting us in ways we never imagined. It's impacting countries, organizations, individuals, and activities of corporate organizations and individuals. One aspect of corporate activities that is being impacted by COVID-19 is the corporate meetings. Unfortunately, COVID is coming at a time when corporate meetings are held globally to review activities of the previous year, 2019, and to plan for 2020. And as a result of that, there have been challenges as to how to navigate in such a way that corporate decisions are taken in order to promote the sustainability of businesses. Because of these challenges, basically we are faced with a situation whereby the fundamental assumptions of meetings are being distorted by COVID. Prior to COVID, the fundamental assumption of meeting is that it has to be physical meeting, a face-to-face meeting. And apart from that, as much as possible, we encourage participants attending meetings to interact with themselves before and during the meeting through handshake, hugging. Have a handshake. you are also advised as possible in order to avoid being isolated for at least 2 weeks. But the good thing about human beings basically is that we are creative, and as a result of that, we have embraced this new way of working, that is using virtual meetings to achieve the same purpose that a physical meeting would have achieved. And that is why a lot of individuals, a lot of corporate organizations, they've been holding their meetings using the virtual platform in such a way that the activities of organizations are not disrupted. However, we must be conscious of the fact that virtual meetings will not be limited to this era of COVID. Even after COVID, virtual meeting will still be the main platform for hosting meetings. And you observe that the number of virtual meetings that have been held in the last 1 month, particularly in Nigeria, I can speak because I'm in Nigeria, is more than the total number of virtual meetings held in 2019. There are some requirements of a valid meeting. Some of these requirements is that a valid meeting must have a venue, must have a date, must have time, and also the content. There is no dispute about the time of a virtual meeting. There is no dispute about the day of the virtual meeting and also the content. But what is controversial is the venue. Nobody is sure of the venue. People are speculating. And for you to test that particular controversy, what you need to do is to, by the time I think you participated in the questions that will enable you to register fully, we ask 3 simple questions. Have you participated in virtual meeting? A majority of the participants said yes. We asked them, where will you expect the secretary to record at the venue? You'll be surprised with the responses we receive. Some said Zoom, some said online, some said the app you are using, some said the cloud, some said the ICT space, some said social media. And I'm not surprised because there is a lot of controversy. This is a new area and nobody is sure. And then we ask the third question. Why do you think that your answer in 2 should be the correct venue? And also to show that nobody is sure of this, people say, that is my gut feeling. I feel that should be the venue. There is no provision for that. And so you can see that there is a lot of knowledge gap in this area. And that is why the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, as the hub of governance professionals, decided to put this webinar in place to bring in our seasoned experts to talk to stakeholders on where should be recorded as the venue of the virtual meeting, and not only the venue, for you also to know the reasons why that particular venue has been stated. Because it's not enough for you to tell your directors or the shareholders that this is the venue of the virtual meeting. You must be in a position to substantiate why. So this expert today will be providing the information to us, and I encourage each and every one of us to listen carefully. And because this area is new and is controversial, I'm not surprised with the number of registered participants. As of this morning, 559 participants have registered. And in my own view, that appears to be the highest number of people registered for any webinar in Nigeria in the last 1 month. And as we speak now, we have 229, it has moved to 232, 33 joining us. So that shows the interest. My appeal is to all participants to carefully listen. Don't allow any distraction. You will get what is expected from this particular webinar as to the venue of the meeting and the why that should be the venue of the meeting. And at the end of the webinar, the guidance note will be issued and circulated by the Institute so that you have a quick reference point if you are being challenged or if you need to refresh your memory on what should be the venue of virtual meeting. However, if you are still in doubt or you need clarification, feel free to contact the Institute. If you have any question relating to corporate governance, if you have any question relating to this particular matter, virtual meeting, feel free to contact the Institute. We will always be there for you to provide guidance. As you know, we are the hub of governance professionals and we will be in a position to guide you.
Absolutely.
So I thank you, and I now request that the moderator should continue with the proceedings.
Thank you so much, my president. Very, very well-spoken word of advice for this very unusual time. So our participants, we have no doubt that we just laid a solid foundation for today's discussion. So we'll just go right ahead to invite our panelists. These are the people that we call the leaders of leaders in the Institute, and we are so pleased to have them join us on this webinar. So I would like to introduce Dr. Nosike Agokei, FCIS, the past president of ICSAN and the current chairman of Education Committee, ICSAN. We have Mr. Yomi Adebanjo, FCIS, Mr. Leo Okafor. Leo, I hope you can hear us. To give us a definition of a virtual meeting, a virtual corporate meeting, what is your definition?
Thank you, Abiola. Thank you, Abiola. A virtual corporate meeting can be described as a meeting that is not physically held, organized online, for participants or those entitled to attend that meeting to discuss issues on the agenda, and of which they need not be physically present at the meeting. That is a short description of what is a virtual meeting. It is open to different interpretations, but that's why I called it a description, because a full definition will be hard to have until the law is passed stating specifically and defining what a virtual meeting is.
Thank you very much, Leo. And what are the common types of virtual meetings?
Well, for common types of virtual meetings, it's either a full virtual meeting or it's called a hybrid meeting. Now, a full virtual meeting is a meeting where all the participants are dialing in or participating from different locations, and they are not physically in one location. Whereas a hybrid meeting is one where some are gathered at a particular venue, attending the meeting, and while those who could not meet up physically are also participating in the meeting virtually. So that's why it's called hybrid, a mixture of physical and non-physical meeting.
Thank you so much, Leo. My next question will piggyback on what you have just said. So can you explain the differences between these types of meetings with regard to specific examples like the board meetings, committee meetings, etc.?
Now, to start with, it's assumed for board meetings that the articles of association of each meeting have enabled or empowered the board to hold such meetings. If the articles do not permit them, it can be amended to permit them to do so. Now, based on that assumption, the usual notices are sent out by the company secretary indicating the date, the time, and the venue of such meeting, and at the same time, giving other ground rules how such meetings must be held. And then before such meetings are held, there is some form of rehearsal, at least the previous day, so that everything is seamless and would run smoothly without interactions. That also means that other logistics in terms of the IT infrastructure is in place and there are no distractions during the meeting.
Thank you so much, Leo. I would like to call on Dr. Nosike to share his personal experiences on the virtual corporate meetings. Doctor, are you there? Okay, I think Doctor might be having some technology problems. So we'll like, Doctor, are you here? Yomi, will you want to take up this question? Share your own personal experiences with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, Doctor, we can hear you.
All right, thank you very much, Moderator, and thank you to my president. My personal experience, the truth is that the COVID-19 pandemic has virtually forced entities, organizations to now have online meetings. But some of us have had online meetings. And my experience goes to the point of, first of all, making sure that the rules of meetings are the rules. You must play to the rules in accordance with the rules. But the experience has been that shareholders and members and directors have not come to the realization that this is a channel that they now have to use to run meetings. And this is why this webinar is very important. And this is why the awareness campaign is very important. Now, corporate meetings online are meetings that are valid. There's nothing wrong with them. The CAMA is very clear. The CAMA has not said, do not use virtual meetings. It has not provided for it expressly, but it has also not said, don't do it. So virtual meetings are very important meetings. And their meetings, if they are properly organized, IT infrastructure is good, then it's as valid as any other meeting. All right, so the point is either you have a hybrid or a full virtual meeting. What is important is for you to play in accordance with the rules. And as company secretaries and those who manage meetings, we must be very conversant with those rules.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll also like you to tell us why it is necessary to ascertain the venue of a virtual meeting. I think you've alluded a bit to that now, but we want you to just expatiate on this. Is it a legal requirement for corporate meetings?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. If you look at CAMA says that the place of meeting, particularly the annual general meeting, should be Nigeria. The fact of the venue of the meeting is not expressly stated, but by implication, it means that there has to be a venue for the meeting. And in terms of practice, there is venue. Because if we also look at CAMA, it says that the notice of meeting.
Thank you, Doctor. I would like to call on Mr. Adebanjo to tell us, for hybrid virtual meetings, where is the venue? And kindly give us your justification or rationale behind whatever you are going to guide us on. Mr. Adebanjo, please.
First and foremost, I welcome all the participants to this forum, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity of being part of this event. For a hybrid virtual meeting, we always say that there is a venue. The major organizers of that meeting are present in a particular location. Others only dial in either to make some presentation or because the students is there physically, they are dialing in and participating in that meeting. So it is not something we will go over and over to argue. The venue is given in the original place that meeting is called. If, for instance, we call the board meeting at number 44 and get straight, we have the quorum present at that meeting there at Ayeku, and two other directors who could not join physically are now able to do so virtually. The venue of that meeting is given. You cannot that goes without saying that I expect it in registered office or the venue of that meeting and should be recorded as well without controversy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adebanjo. We'd like to remind our participants to please drop their questions, their comments in the chat room. I will pick them up from there. So for full virtual meeting, where will you consider as the venue based on express provision? I would like Mr. Adebanjo to.
Okay. I will go through it in three ways. In some circumstances, there are express provisions of the law or regulations requiring that certain meetings must be held in certain places. So where there are express provisions in the law requiring a meeting to be held, for as regards AGM, where the law says the place for that meeting must be in Nigeria, in 216 of Kama. Wherever that meeting is caused to be held, or whatever medium the meeting is brought together, the organizers must also remember that the venue of that meeting is legally, statutorily speaking, in Nigeria. I was explaining that.
Thank you.
In agreeing the venue of a virtual meeting, certain factors must be considered, and one of them that is key is where there is a statutory provision as to where this meeting by law should be held. And I gave an instance of an AGM where the law has expressly required, for instance, of a Nigerian company, that it must be in Nigeria. To that extent, wherever that meeting is held, however it is brought about, virtually, it must still be recorded as a meeting held in Nigeria.
Now, we can hear you.
I would only be able to say the meeting was held at 268 Korodu Road, even though it will be held virtually. Then we also go to the issue of customs. By a board charter, by an association's charter, they have agreed that their meeting will be held at all times at so place. In that regard, it would not matter that that meeting was held virtually, because virtuality of the meeting and the legality of it, they are two different things. And the case we are making for having a venue for a virtual meeting is to answer the legality of it as to make the meeting valid in the event of a challenge. So customarily, we will determine that this meeting, where will it have been held if it was not virtual? Then that venue, that place where we will answer it will have been held as so place, will still be recorded as the venue. Where there is a statutory provision, it will still be recorded as having been held in Nigeria, but at the company's registered office address. And for board meetings generally, as much as they have the freedom to determine their proceedings, they still have to hold that meeting in accordance with the board charter, the articles, and generally obeying the principles of law as regards the fact that it must have a venue. But where there is a controversy, what we are saying is that the registered office address should be stated. And also in all cases where the meeting is convened by an outsourced company secretary, if the board is accustomed to having the address of that secretary as the registered office, that address as for that virtual meeting. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Adebanjo. I would just want you to clarify for us. It appears that you have also raised the issue of some default position or parameters for ascertaining the venue of a virtual meeting. We would like, for the purpose of, for the benefit of our participants, could you just expatiate on this point a little bit? So there are express provisions, which is very clear as to where the venue of a virtual meeting would be held. But can you just highlight a little bit more on the default position so that we can pick the salient points from your own point of view? Thank you.
Right. The point I was making is that every convener of a meeting should address where by law should this meeting be held. Is it a meeting that carries the venue as a matter of law? An example of such a meeting is the AGM. The law is clear that the AGM of a Nigerian company must be held in Nigeria.
We lost you for a couple of seconds. Can you?
All right. I said the explanation I was giving was that the convener of every meeting, particularly such things as AGM, should resolve within him or herself the question as to, is there a legal provision as to the venue of this meeting? If that answer is in the affirmative, as in the case of AGM, then the virtuality of that meeting notwithstanding, the meeting will still have to be recorded as having been held in Nigeria, even if majority of participants are from Germany by virtual connections. And I then went further, that it may also still become controversial, which address in Nigeria should we then use? And I said the registered office address of that company will be readily available for use in that circumstance. Then I mentioned the issue of board meetings. And there are two things I mentioned about it. That number one, the law itself gives the directors a kind of liberty to organize their meetings as they deem fit, which will include where to hold that meeting and where not to hold it. In the event that they are not expressed as to where their meeting will be held, the registered office address will still be, but where their board charter or the articles or the constitution of a non-for-profit organization already has stated that the board meetings of this organization shall at all times be held as also please. Then, in the event of force majeure, if they can't get to that address, the meeting will still be deemed to have been held at that place where they have all agreed by custom to have their meeting. That is the point I've made, moderator. Hello?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Adebanjo. We are grateful for the emphasis you've laid because it appears that this is an area that is not too clear. And I trust that our participants have taken notes and it's a bit clearer now how we should be advising our stakeholders on this issue of the venue of a virtual corporate meeting, especially when there are no express provisions. Just before I let you go, Mr. Adebanjo, I also want you to tell us how you capture the venue of a notice of a meeting, in the notice of a meeting of a virtual corporate meeting, as well as the minutes, so that we can have a holistic view on both the legality of the venue, how to draft the notice, as well as the recording, that is the minutes.
Thank you very much. Every company secretary or practitioner on this platform know one thing for sure, and that is the fact that the notice of every meeting shall contain, at the minimum, the venue of that meeting. In this regard, whether the meeting is going to be virtually held or physically held, you still must separate virtuality from legality, and then make a mention in that notice of where the meeting ordinarily should have been held if it were to be physical. To that extent, I would say that the notice of meeting should, as I've said earlier, carry the address of that place we have agreed it should be, and that same address you put in the notice must be recorded as it has always been in the minutes of meeting. If, for instance, for purposes of emphasis, if we say the meeting is an AGM and going to be held virtually, and unfortunately that's a force majeure, we can't go to the regular place and we are holding it virtually. If that meeting also has been held at the registered office, as we have agreed here, then the minutes will also carry the same address as you have been written on the notice. In a nutshell, we are simply saying here that notwithstanding the virtuality of the meeting, there still must be a notice of that meeting which states clearly an address for purposes of minutes writing and for purposes of legality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adebanjo. Incidentally, I'm looking through the questions from our participants, and it appears that you have covered some of the ones that relate to this particular element of the notice of a meeting, of a virtual meeting, as well as how the minutes will be captured as well. So I would like to call on Dr. Nosike to tell us when you're setting up, for instance, a Skype virtual meeting. Skype meeting pops up as the location, rather. Should Skype be regarded then as the venue of such meeting? Dr. Nosike, please.
To be the venue of the meeting. Skype is an infrastructure, or Zoom is an infrastructure that enables you to have that meeting. Skype is not a physical place. Zoom is not a physical place. These are simply enablers. Infrastructure that you have put in place to deliver the venue of the meeting. So they cannot be the meeting venue. The meeting venue is the place where the host is. And you may pointed to this fact at the beginning, that the meeting can be hosted by the company secretary or the chairman, depending on the agreement that is reached, the board charter, or by the board. So the Skype or the Zoom cannot be the venue. And I will give you one of the reasons why it shouldn't be. Now, if you have a football match at the National Stadium and you are receiving transmission on your TV from NTA, for instance, NTA.
We'll crave your indulgence for you to start again.
I was saying that Skype or Zoom cannot be the venue, that these are simply infrastructure that enable you to have the meeting, all right? That it's like taking a football match that is being transmitted by the NTA from Abuja, all right? It's not the NTA that's the venue of the match. The venue of the match is the National Stadium. So what NTA simply does is to transmit that match using their infrastructure. So Zoom or Skype cannot be the venue of the meeting. The venue of the meeting, as Mr. Adebanjo rightly pointed out, will be the place that has been agreed to be the venue. In this case, the registered office of the company or the head office, as the case may be. So Zoom or Skype cannot be said to be the meeting.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm just going to write on this last statement, still on the issue of Skype or Zoom. So there's a question that is saying that what if there's a legal requirement here that you would just have to answer on behalf of our participants? The participant is aligned with you largely because it's something that they've been practicing, but it's not clear for a PLC that. However, for a PLC, there could be a problem if the issue of using the registered office is contested. The participant wants to know whether your comment is based on law or logic because it is not supported by the law. So Adebanjo, I hope that is clear.
Right. One thing that is clear to all practitioners is that the only address known with the company is the registered office address, which coincidentally must be filed at the registry. So in circumstances where it becomes difficult, as the cases we are facing today, and one cannot actually say, where is this meeting holding? Then one goes back to the law. And the law, as far as addresses relating to company transactions are concerned, is still the registered office address, right? If, for instance, you have to serve a court process and you couldn't find a way to do so, you'll be advised to go to the registered office address. At the same time, if an AGM of a PLC is supposedly to be holding and becomes controversial that if this meeting holding in Lagos or Kaduna, for sure that the participants are in Nigeria, because the meeting was in Nigeria. There is one ID, there is one address that is central to everybody, and that is also known to the law, that is not easily faulted. We couldn't hold it anywhere, but we have held it at the company's registered office address. Meanwhile, we already understand that this meeting is virtual. We are trying to make it legal as of venue, so that if it is challenged on the basis of venue, one will have a legal basis to say, look, the meeting was held at the company's registered office address. That was the point I was making. Whether you say it is backed by law or not backed by law, it can't be more legal to say that the only address you know of a company that is statutory is the registered office address, because that is the only address you will have to notify to the public through the registrar of companies. And I will stand by that to say that that address, even for a PLC,
All right, thank you, Mr. Adebanjo.
Madam Moderator, can I step in?
Please.
Can I just make a contribution, please?
Yes, please go ahead, Doctor.
No, it's not quite right to say that it's not supported by law. All right. I know you said someone said it's not supported by law, but it's not exactly correct to say that, because the board is empowered by the Act to convene the AGM. It's not the members that convene the AGM. It is the board that passes a resolution to convene the AGM. And one of the things that the board is supposed to do in passing that resolution is to determine the date, the time, and the venue. All right, so the board has that power given to it by law to determine venue. So if the board resolves in convening the AGM that the actual meeting should be held at the registered office of the company, there's nothing that anybody can say about that in terms of going against the law. It's very clear that the board has that power. And in any case, even for in-person meetings that are not virtual meetings, it's not the shareholders that determine the venue, it's the board. By convening the meeting, you only give notice to shareholders as to where the meeting should be held. So it's not quite right to say that the choice of the registered office is not backed by law. The board is empowered to determine venue, and in passing that resolution convening the AGM, they decide on where the meeting should be held.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Well, the flip side of what you have said, which we stand by, is that, we've had a very unusual time and a lot of confusion around how meetings that have been set, the notice of meetings, for instance, of AGM have been issued, and a particular venue has been indicated as the venue for the AGM. But because of the lockdown that came upon us suddenly, such companies have not had the opportunity to either reissue notice of the meeting to change the venue. So we'd like you to just give a guidance on that. There are lots of our colleagues who are confused right now as to what to do, because some of them have issued the notice of their AGM before this lockdown, and now it is impossible to use such venue. What would be your advice, sir?
Well, thank you very much. This point is very clear. The practice those days was that if you convened an AGM and issued a notice, you couldn't change it unless you went to the AGM and passed a resolution to adjourn it. But the practicalities are very clear. Now, let's look at it. The board resolves to call the AGM, in other words, convene the AGM, determines the date, determines the venue, determines the time. Now, if there's an event that will prevent the holding of that meeting as scheduled by the board, then the board will also have to pass a resolution saying that as a result of this event, it is no longer possible to hold this meeting as scheduled. As a result, the meeting will now be held virtually. and that the virtual meeting will be held on so-so day at so-so time. It may still be the same day that they have chosen before, but the new notice will have to be very clear to all the shareholders, and it has to be published. And this takes me back to the issue of proxy statements. You know, the issue of proxy statements, many companies have not taken this seriously, because that is also an instrument that can help the company to inform shareholders as to things that are happening after the annual report has been issued. But that's a different subject entirely. But the key point that I'm making is the board should not sit back and say, oh, there's a problem, so this meeting no longer hold, and sit back and nothing happens. The board should be able to meet virtually, if it is not possible to meet physically, pass a resolution and change the course of the meeting in terms of changing it from an in-person meeting to a virtual meeting, and give adequate notice to shareholders.
I think that is really clear on what we should be looking at, and as well as advising our board on as an authority on this. Mr. Leo Okafor, this question is to you. Should the virtual meeting be included in the KAMA Bill 2020 or made as regulations if CS is given that power by the pending KAMA Bill to be signed? And why would you think this is the way to go? Leo, please.
I'll start by saying yes, it should be included in the amended and yet to be signed off KAMA. This is a new responsibility for the National Assembly to go back and include this there. I knew it's always in progress. As of the time the final bill was passed to the presidency for signing, COVID-19 had not surfaced. Now that we have COVID-19 and the effects clearly manifesting not only on virtual meetings, there is an address massive issues, but also on other things it has thrown up recently. So that is a task not only on the National Assembly, but also through the Security and Exchange Commission, the Corporate Affairs Commission, and all regulatory bodies that are involved in the supervision and enforcement of the KAMA. So yes to the question, it should go back, should be amended again, even though what we had before, in my opinion, was not a finished product. So let's make it up by addressing the issues exposed by the COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Leo. Incidentally, we can see a lot of questions around this point on whether KAMA should be further, the proposed KAMA bill should be further amended. And I think that's addressed some of our participants' concerns. So the new normal is definitely to include this as a key clause, key provision in the KAMA bill. Now, Leo, I'm still with you. Are there changes that organizations can make in order to validate this virtual meetings? What would be your take on this?
Now, my take is pending the
This is giving that power by the pending KAMA bill to be signed. And why would you think this is the way to go? Leo, please.
I'll start by saying yes, it should be included in the amended and yet to be signed off KAMA. This is a new responsibility for the National Assembly to go back and include this there. I knew it's always in progress. As of the time the final bill was passed to the presidency for signing, COVID-19 had not surfaced. Now that we have COVID-19 and the effects clearly manifesting not only on virtual meetings, there is an address massive issues, but also on other things it has thrown up recently. So that is a task not only on the National Assembly, but also through the Security and Exchange Commission, the Corporate Affairs Commission, and all regulatory bodies that are involved in the supervision and enforcement of the CAMA. So yes to the question, it should go back, should be amended again, even though what we had before, in my opinion, was not a finished product. So let's make it up by addressing the issues exposed by the COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Leo. Incidentally, we can see a lot of questions around this point on whether CAMA should be further, the proposed CAMA bill should be further amended. And I think that's addressed some of our participants' concerns. So the new normal is definitely to include this as a key clause, key provision in the CAMA bill. Now, Leo, I'm still with you. Are there changes that organizations can make in order to validate this virtual meetings? What would be your take on this?
Now, my take is pending the amendment of the CAMA to incorporate these new changes. Organizations on their own should do two basic things. First of all, amend the memorandum and articles in particular to empower the companies to hold virtual meetings and to be very clear with respect to the medium, or leave it open to the various platforms applicable to them. Secondly, they need to invest in the infrastructure for such meetings, so that such meetings will be very clear, audible, and when recorded, whoever has access to it can clearly follow and be satisfied that this meeting was very clear.
A few words on that. So what would be ICSAN's advice to organizations regarding virtual AGMs? Doctor?
Well, yeah, I think Leo has said it, but let me add that what will be very critical is that some states in America, most of the states, have got laws on virtual meetings. Now, even if we have provisions in our articles as to the processes, and then endeavor to ensure that we comply with the provisions of the law. All right, so yes, it's a stopgap, I think, that Leo has advised. Once the law is amended and includes provisions on virtual meetings, then it will become clearer for companies to now know what to do in terms of the articles of association. Because if you So my advice, and I think that ICSAN has actually done quite a lot on this, is yes, let's find out what can be done now as stopgap measures, and then make it wholesale in terms of implementation and amendment after that law has come into place. What is important now is for all stakeholders, and I believe that ICSAN is doing a lot in this regard, to motivate and encourage the CAC to do the needful as quickly as possible, so that we don't amend our articles and then find that we have to go back again and amend.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think that's a very, very important point. And as usual, I know that ICSAN will work with the CAC and just leverage on the partnership and the collaborative efforts we've always had with them. Now, before I let you go, Doctor, there's an interesting question on the chat room. Participants are asking, so how do we sign the register of attendance for the board meetings, the committee meetings, if being held virtually? I know it looks obvious, but it would be nice to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, it's, let me make it very clear. Signing a document, there's actually two basic ways of signing the document. You can, many people are used to signing documents cartographically. That is to say, you inscribe your signature. The fact that you have not inscribed your signature does not mean that you haven't, there's no indication that you attended the meeting. All right. If you look at the minutes of meetings, you will find that participants or attendees, particularly for board, for instance, the minutes of the board meeting, those who attended do not sign the minutes to indicate that they attended. What they sign is the record of a register of attendance. And anybody can question that record of attendance. But the point that I'm trying to bring out here is the fact that once the system records that you have participated, because you sign in, and the system will record the fact that you've signed in. I signed in this morning, and I got a mail that says, thank you for registering for this meeting. I think that should be sufficient to indicate those who attended the meeting. So it does not matter whether you signed cartographically inscribing your signature. Once the infrastructure and the system has recorded the fact that you attended the meeting, I think that should be sufficient.
Thank you, Doctor. That is super, super clear. Now to Mr. Adebanjo. I think this would be for the purpose of emphasis. So what should companies do in order to validly hold a virtual AGM? We've moved the conversation to AGM now, so we could just take this as well. So in your own opinion, what do you suggest the companies should do?
What I will advise generally is that holding AGM at times like this, structure around it. So I will advise that in trying to use this virtual means of holding AGM, companies should give citizens and they should consider the need for involvement of everybody, the possibility of as many people as possible to participate is quite important. And that fact is emphasized in many codes of corporate governance, whether the national one or the industry specific. So my advice would be, do an exercise of an internal audit of your register of members. Know how many of them usually come to AGMs. Know how many of them will, by virtue of this means, be able to also still participate.
Please, just a quick one.
Okay.
I've seen so many questions on this issue of record of attendance. The point that I was making is, you register, but the system has a way of recording participants. All right, the system will record those who...
Thank you, sir. I think that clarifies.
Yeah.
Now, I'm picking a question from our participants regarding the peculiarity of this time. The participant wants to know that if we are recording the minutes or the venue of the virtual meeting as the registered office, that how do we justify it in view of the national restrictions on offices being opened and operated at this time? You know, for the sake of prosperity, everybody knows that the last 1 month we've been on the lockdown. And then 11 years from now, the minute is picked up. And then it shows that the virtual meeting was held at the registered office. I know it's a tricky one, but I would like Doctor to also address this.
No, there's nothing tricky about it. There's nothing tricky about it. The meeting is held virtually. All right, there's a lockdown. The meeting is held virtually. What that simply means, and I think Leo mentioned it at the beginning, is that participants were not present in person. So there will be no question in 10 years' time, anybody to question why there was a lockdown, how come it was possible to hold the meeting. The facts are very clear. A full virtual meeting means that persons were not there physically. So there's really nothing tricky about it. I think it has to be made clear to whoever has asked this question that by virtue of the fact that it's a virtual meeting, the lockdown will not affect the holding of that meeting. But what is important is to emphasize that it is a virtual meeting. And that's why it is important in the notice of meeting, under notes in the notice, you usually have notes on proxy, on dividend, on closure of register, to also have a note on the fact that this meeting will be a virtual meeting, which will be held online. It will not be an in-person meeting. So there won't be any confusion at all.
Thank you so much. I think that clarifies. Technically, we've moved on to picking some of the questions from our participants. We have a lot of them, but I have somewhat been batching them so that some of the questions that are similar are given to our panelists, to speak through generally. So participants, be rest assured that your questions are being answered one way or the other. Now, there's also another interesting one here from one of our participants. It is the essence of meeting being to be seen and heard. How will the company secretary know members who truly were in attendance? That's the first part. And how will the issue of a member not getting information passed on virtual meeting due to network issues be resolved? And finally, the issue of quorum of a member leaving but does not log out from the virtual meeting. Now, this is a 3-in-1 question that I want Leo to please address. These are some technicalities that even, someone who is a cantankerous director or someone who can decide to challenge the meetings if these abnormalities are not corrected or addressed adequately. So Leo, I don't know if you got that question or you want me to take it again?
Okay, I would like you to take it one by one so I can answer them one by one. But before then, I'll start with the last question, which rang a bell in my head, about some who logged in but left before the meeting ended.
Mm-hmm. That's the issue of a quorum. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Case law is very clear on this, that if a meeting commences and there's a quorum, full quorum, and along the line and before the meeting ended, some persons left the meeting and the number dropped, it does not invalidate the meeting. Quorum technically remains until the meeting ends or is adjourned. So I'll check the subsequent questions. If you can just take it one by one for me to remember.
Okay, so how would the company secretary know the members who were truly in attendance? That's number one. And how would the issue of a member not getting information passed on for the virtual meeting due to network issues be resolved? So how would the company secretary, the corporate secretary keep a tab on those who were truly in attendance, as well as the issue of information for the meeting, maybe perhaps due to network issues?
All right. The first question to answer it has already been treated in the course of the discussion. The system, the software, or the platform itself being used, whether it's Zoom or whether it's Skype, takes record of the attendees. So at the end of the meeting, the company secretary will call for the list from the software, from the IT, and will include, take note of those who attended. That is very clear. Just like what we are going currently now in the webinar, if you look through the participants, you have that list there. So you really know who is there. Now, second question, assuming the adequate information is not passed on to the recipient or the person who is to participate in the meeting. This is close to akin to someone saying, I did not get the notice of the meeting. If the notice was not given or was not received, there are a number of case law issues surrounding this address or this issue. If there's proof of service of delivery, that is sufficient. If for some reasons the person's network issues do not permit him or her to access the information given, then it's not the fault of the company secretary or the company itself, because adequate notice and information had been passed to the person. And this boils down to the things that need to be in place for virtual meetings, which means there must be adequate infrastructure. To those participating at the meeting, they must have proper or full internet or data on their phones, as the case may be. That also means that it should be kept separate, uninterrupted. For example, if your data is on, calls coming in, it's interrupting it. So in the course of that, some information is missing, then it's the fault of the recipient. Because from the part of the company giving out the notice and information, everything has been done. It's not left for the recipient to ensure that they have stable internet service and other facilities to accommodate the participation in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That is, what will be the proper ingredients of a participation at a meeting? And that is to say that as we are here, if we can see and we can be seen, we can hear and we can be heard, that is enough ingredient of participation to record that that person is actually present at the meeting. The second area is that attendance at a meeting, once recorded at the beginning of that meeting, you cannot remove that person's name that is absent. That person is already in there. To corroborate what Dr. Agokei said, once the instrument of this medium has recorded that person as being there, whether that person leaves in the course of the meeting and as to whether that exit can actually invalidate that proceeding will turn on some factors. Will that business require the presence of this person that has just gone out? If his presence will be needed, if his presence will be a kind of special quorum for that business, his exit for that particular business may affect that transaction. On all other grounds, the exit of one member cannot invalidate the proceedings of a meeting. But we are also going to be very careful that if the quorum for a meeting is 30, and at the beginning we see 34, in the course of the meeting, it depreciates to 4. The question then will be in common law, on what grounds are these 4 people continuing with the meeting, especially if there are quarrels, if there are squabbles in the course of the proceedings. So the answer will not be straightforward, as in saying that, well, if they leave, it is their headache. The meeting continues. And I will refer our participants to Sanitary Carbon Company. It's a case on this matter. There's also a case of London Flat. For those who are writing, read these 2 cases and it will throw more light as regards exit of a member in the course of proceeding, whether it will or whether it will not invalidate the proceedings. It's not going to be a straight answer, but read those 2 cases as a matter of further study. And I think that's what I will have to say for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adebanjo. We want to thank all of our participants for your questions. We've tried as much as possible to batch them up to pass on to our panelists.
Moderator, can I add to that last point?
All right, sir.
See, this is why we encourage company secretaries and directors to read their governance documents. The directors and company secretary must read the memo and articles of association regularly. Now, you see some, like when you go through some articles, you'll find, I have seen some companies that have quorum for AGM 100, quorum for AGM 50, 60. It does not make sense. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown up quite a lot of things that organizations will now begin to look at their governance documents. And one of these documents is the articles of association. Go and look at your quorum again. Make it something that is realizable. We're talking about people leading the meeting and creating uncertainty because of thresholds of quorum that are not convenient. So what is important now is go back and look at the quorum provision in your articles and ensure that what you have there is convenient. If it is not, you need to make an amendment because we're not having a clear situation. We don't know when this problem will end. Even if it ends, there will be a new world order on meetings. So we need to go and look at our governance documents again and then begin to amend them to suit the circumstances of the new world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Incidentally, Doctor, I was just going to ask you to give us your final comments as we draw very close to the end of this webinar. Before you do that, let me just assure our participants that ICSAN is going to release the guidance notes on virtual corporate meetings after this webinar, and you can be rest assured that this will be circulated widely. So please look out for this. We also have, of course, you can take the opportunity to also drop your comments, your questions on the relevant platforms on our website, and we will endeavor to get back to you. So as we draw very close to the end of this webinar, I would like our panelists to just give their parting shots, and I'll also at some point invite the president to also give us his parting shot. So Mr. Adebanjo, your parting shots, please.
First and foremost, I want to thank our president, Mr. Bode Ayeku, for this opportunity of sharing my views with a female listener. And to the participants, I am very glad to be part of you this morning, good afternoon, and to also say thank you for your listening ears and for participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Leo Okafor.
Yes. The chats and interactions from participants have been quite encouraging, and I can see that most of them are also quite knowledgeable in the field, and their suggestions should be taken on board in the communique that will be released soon. Quite encouraging, and I encourage them all to keep it up. But don't forget, to those who feel it may be a big problem, a big trouble, or somewhat of inconvenience to ask the organizations to amend their extant documents like their articles. Even when you have the command, they still need for you to have, command may not speak your mind. It's good to speak your mind, but put it in the articles the way it will suit you. It doesn't need to be today or tomorrow. You will need it someday. If everyone had known about COVID-19 10, 20 years ago, there would have been some provisions for it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. And Doctor, your parting shots, please.
Well, my parting shot is, first of all, as practitioners, let us read and continue to read. And then let us consult. Let's talk to ourselves from time to time where we think that the issues are not clear, so that we don't make mistakes. The other point that I need to make is, I've seen so many questions. For a webinar of this kind, where you have a large number of participants, it's not possible to deal with all the questions during the webinar. So I think that those questions should be put together so that we can provide answers to the ones that we haven't had the opportunity of listening to or addressing, and find a way of sending answers or responses to people later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We have taken notes of that. That would be dealt with adequately. Mr. President, your parting shots, please.
It is my pleasure to thank the moderator, Mrs. Abiola Laseinde, and the distinguished speakers. I must emphasize some points in our interest. The summary basically is for us to be sure of the venue, and our speakers, they've told us that there are two ways of knowing the venue of a virtual meeting. It's either you look at the written documents you have, for example, the charter, the articles, if any, or the terms of reference specifying the venue, that will provide the clear guidance. However, where there is no clear express instruction, you need to consider the default parameters. Or some of those parameters are, you look at where is the traditional venue of such meeting if it were to be held physically. That can be used. In most cases, it will be the register office or the corporate head office. If you are not looking at that, you look at where is the base or the office address of the host initiating the meeting, who can be the chairman or the secretary. So let's look at these parameters. They will be well documented in the guidance to be released by ICSAN after this webinar. One key factor is that we must ensure that we start sensitizing our shareholders now. We've been talking about amendment. We need to carry the shareholders along. And we need to tell them that we never envisage COVID-19 and we do not know what will happen, God forbid, in future. And we need to tell them that it is necessary to incorporate a default provision in our articles, allowing the companies to hold their corporate meetings. It may be board meeting, committee meetings, or AGM virtually. If you tell them that it will be by default, that will assuage their feelings that you are not putting them at a disadvantaged position, or you do not want them to be part of the meeting. Fortunately, in most parts of the world currently, and this is the season of AGM, even if we are not amending it now, let us at our AGM now be telling shareholders that we'll be coming back to you shortly to amend the articles to accommodate virtual meetings. And as soon as possible, if you assuage their feelings, and then let them know that you put in place infrastructure, they are very likely to accept your proposal to amend. I think that is very, very key, and we must not forget about that. So company also should try to invest in infrastructure to ensure that there is adequate participation. If we're able to do this, I don't see any reason why any natural disaster should affect any corporate meetings going forward. So as soon as possible, please link up with the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria if you have any concern or questions or additional clarification on any corporate governance matter or on this particular issue. We will definitely get back to you. We are the hub of governance professionals, and we'll be there to support entities, regulatory authorities to do things right. And also be on the lookout. There will be another webinar on another interesting topical and relevant issue shortly. So just be on the lookout and participate. So on that note, I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And to our distinguished panelists, thank you so much for all your valuable contributions. Our participants, we really appreciate you. A lot of you have stayed through. We've had over 300 and something participating in this webinar. We have come to the end of the webinar, and of course, I have no doubt that we gained a lot of insight on a general framework for our virtual corporate meetings. And as the governance professionals, we can confidently stand to advise our board and other stakeholders on this key element of our new way of working. Once again, we thank our participants and also all of our panelists for attending this session. Please be reminded that, like the president has said, we're publishing the ICSAN guidance of virtual corporate meetings after this session, and I can assure you that we are going to reflect some of the valuable insight you've also shared with us on this in this document, and we encourage you to look out for the notes on our website and our other social media handles. My name is Abiola Laseinde. I'm the chairman of the ICSAN Corporate Members and Training Committee. It's been an absolute delight hosting you on this webinar today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. God bless you as you continue with the rest of your schedules for today. We sign out now. Thank you.